right, so welcome everyone to highly anticipated season 3 of TLG's Faction Chat. I'm joined by my other awesome co-host, King Chessy. Chessy, how's your recovering going from the qualifiers last weekend? We know it was rather exhausting.
I'm totally recovered. And I'm really looking forward to season 3 of Faction Chat. I'm sure it'll go off with absolutely no hitches, right? I'm sure it'll be a season 3. Nothing whatsoever. We're in for a fantastic season 3.
Yeah, it's a flying start for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it will be perfect. Plain sailing. But yeah, qualifiers went well. I'm fully recovered and I'm rearing to go for the whole of season 3. So what have we got going on today?
So today we venture into the spooky kind monsters, and we have some like really awesome guests joining us today. I mean, we always do, but tonight is like a special one. So would you care to introduce them, Mr. Jesse?
For sure. I think this season we're going to have a really awesome theme behind our guests. First of all, we're starting off, obviously, every episode we have a team member on sharing their knowledge of the faction. And this week we have none other than Bowman. So Bowman, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to talk about monsters. Been on twice to talk about Skellige, and really monsters secretly is the faction I've clocked the most hours with. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. So now moving on from our teammate, who obviously isn't that important, right? Nobody cares about Bowman really.
Exactly.
We've got the really important guest. The theme that we're trying to get going on this season is we're going to try and get some of the faction ambassadors on. And this episode we managed to get hold of Oceanmud. He kindly gave us some of his time to come on, and we do apologize for the technical issues at the start. But thanks for joining us, Oceanmud. How's it going today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to hearing what we have to talk about today. I would say this is my second time on because my first time on was 5 minutes ago whenever we first started. So thanks again for having me, and I'm sure it'll be great.
Awesome. All right then, Beardy, what have we got for our guests today?
Well, now that our guests have been introduced, we should get into Faction Chat. So what's first on the agenda for today, Mr. Chessy?
Okay, so first today we're going to be touching on some hot topics with monsters. I'm curious to find out what everybody's thoughts are on the faction since the patch, along with how their feels for the new leader, Gurnakora. So, Beardy, do you want to kick us off? What are your thoughts on the faction as a whole, and maybe more specifically Gurnakora and where she fits in with the faction?
Well, I started rambling about it last time, but I'll try to keep it short. So basically, I haven't touched Gurnakora. I haven't played a single game with a leader. I don't think she's a very strong leader, very interesting design, and she definitely fits the meta very well. I think compared to, let's say, Woodland, she can bleed way more easily, right? Because as a Woodland player, it's kind of like... interesting scenarios. So you want to bleed round 2, right? Because your short round is like stellar, right? It's superb, but at the same time, you don't want to lose your card, because if you lose your card, you just like play into total unit removal, like especially against Crack. Like that's the thing. Like against Crack, you just get like blue meme, you just get prod or like vanilla Geralt, right? Whereas like Gurnakora, she just like produces points from the get-go, so it's like way easier to bleed, in my opinion. So I mean, I haven't played the deck, but those are like my rookie observations. So yeah.
Interesting observations, Beardy. I feel like I might have heard them somewhere before.
Yeah. I mean that's basically what I want to say, dude.
But yeah, that's very well put. And what about you, Mr. Oceanmud? What are your thoughts on your faction, your favorite faction, and your thoughts on the new leader?
I think that after the patch, which addressed a lot of issues with Yurden and with Regis, I think we can all say that they were probably big issues. I think monsters feel strong, and maybe even too strong, to be honest. In a way that when I was playing before in open beta, before Homecoming, I kind of liked playing monsters because, you know, they weren't the strongest. I always felt like they were kind of like the underdogs because they were fighting against Skellige and they were fighting against Nilfgaard. Now it kind of feels like, what's this feeling where they're on top? You know what I mean? It's like, what am I supposed to do? It's almost, I don't want to say too easy, but I can definitely feel targeted with other factions. And with Gurnakora coming in, Gurnakora's ability, if you guys aren't familiar, Beardy, no, I'm sure you're familiar. If you're not familiar, is they spawn 1 power Thrive units if you don't already have one. And that's, in my mind, that's a nuisance. Like, nuisance in, like, it's so difficult to deal with. And as a if you're playing Gurnakora, and this is for me playing against a Gurnakora, I'm like, man, this feels horrible for me. But yeah, I think the monsters fit right at home in Pro Ladder, and I think they'll continue to be strong, probably up until the expansion that's coming up.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, and I think you've addressed it. You've really hit the nail on the head there, right? Like they've kind of switched from how they were in open beta to being one of the most dominant factions along with Skellige since Homecoming's come out. What about you, Bowman? What are your thoughts and feelings on this newfound love for monsters you've got?
I mean, I sympathise with what Oceanmud's saying a bit, that I liked when monsters were weak because it gave you a good excuse every time you lost, right? You could rage about the meta. But when the faction you love becomes the meta, the strongest in the meta, you lose that. But I mean, so I had some interesting points to say. It seems like they've been recycled by a few other people on the show. Not a problem. But I would say one thing that hasn't been said, like what I like about Gurnakora is I think it's nice. Like we have kind of a lot of very strong high provision leaders, right? At the moment, the meta like Crack and Meave and Morvran are kind of very strongest leaders, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they're all the highest provision leaders. But it's nice, like that I think it's good for the game to have strong leaders that are popular with lower provisions and maybe better passive or active abilities. And it's good that Gurnakora is seeing a lot of play. Whether that will continue, there's a bit of novelty factor at the moment. I'm sure that's part of it, but I think she's very strong, and it's good for the game to have strong leaders like Gurnakora.
For sure, I totally agree with you there. I think monsters, from my personal point of view, with monsters right now, I think monsters is, in my opinion, is the strongest faction. However, there is the caveat of that Skellige is still the most consistent, which means that you might be able to get better results with Skellige simply because of the consistency. But I think from raw power level, monsters is just the strongest at the moment. And Gurnakora, like we've all touched on, is a very unique leader in the fact that she gives you the ability to play 3 ranks. There's very few leaders around like that, especially since Morvran they took the reveal away from him and changed him so that he is now so that you can now have 3 charges as opposed to 1 each round. So Morvran used to be the best 3-round leader, and then they took that away. And Gurney's now filling that as the best 3-round leader. I think monsters is in a really healthy state. I'm sad to hear that they are actually thinking about nerfing monsters, because I'd like to have seen the others be buffed to more monster sort of level, because I think monsters is kind of in a good spot personally. I think monsters is really, really really nice right now. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but it should be good. Okay, so Beardy, what's up next?
Well, basically, it's we are continuing with Gurnakora. So basically, the question is, how has the monster meta shifted from Big Woody last save finisher shenanigans, despite Regis nerf, because Gurnakora happened, and it's up to you to answer that one, Chelsea. It's a pretty complex one.
Yeah, it is a bit of a complex one. So how the monsters meta has shifted. It's funny because Gurney is seeing a lot of play. Gurney's probably the most played leader, right? And we've touched on the reasons being she can run a very similar deck to Woodland, but is less reliant on the round 3 finisher, so that she's less reliant on last say, right, to win those matchups, because there are still counters that if you don't have last say, so people are still running professional, people are still running Leo Bombhat, people are still running just vanilla Geralt in some things. You do see vanilla Geralt cropping up slightly more than he used to. Ufaldin will still hit you hard. There are still counters if you don't have last say, right? So even though the big counters have gone, or seeing reduced play rate, there are still counters around, right? So Woodland still is it's a little sketchy if you don't get last say. But it's not only that, right? It's the fact that Gurney does allow you to push that round to really bleed hard, which is really nice. But we've also seen a shift in the monsters meta to accommodate my personal favorite deck at the moment, the Slizzard deck, right? That is coming in. You're seeing some really good scores with that, and Eredin is still viable, right? Eredin's ability is very unique In my opinion, it's probably the most what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say cancerous, but it is basically cancerous, right? Like,
I mean, Emil's ability is also on par with Aerodus, I would say.
Mia's ability is less cancerous, though, right? It's less cancerous.
It's just because there aren't as cancerous cards yet, but
possibly. But I mean,
like, I think
immunity,
like him and Aerodin,
immunity is it's a problem. But I think monsters as a whole, the meta is quite nice, right? There's a lot of different viable strategies, and that's just because monsters is just really, really strong. Thrive is really, really strong, and so are big boys. So yeah.
Interesting. What about you, Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, I think I think that Gunagora hasn't actually changed the monster meta too much. I think that I guess there's one deck, right, that's seeing play now, which is this kind of mid-range Gunagora deck, which I don't think there was an equivalent of before the patch. So this kind of where you're not running all the big boys and just running kind of more like kind of very similar cards to value Morvan, and some medium boys maybe. That's seeing quite a lot of play, but yeah, I'm not sure that there's been this. I mean, basically this sort of same list that we're running before with Woodland, now running Woodland sometimes and more often Gurning. It's pretty similar.
Okay, and finally, Mr. Oceanmud, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I agree with Aif. Part about whenever I play with monsters, I almost feel like I'm at a disadvantage if I don't play Gurnakora, if I'm a monster player. One of the main reasons is because of cards like Arcspore. So if let's say I'm Aerodin and I'm going against Gurnakora, the Gurnakora plays an Arcspore and it hits my neck or whatever. I play an Arcspore and it hits their leech. So I'm essentially going down in points because I'm not playing Gurnakora and I didn't hit the right target. So in my mind, like Gurnakora is kind of like almost the go-to leader in that sense if you're a monster player. And we know that there's lots of monsters on the ladder. In the place of like, what was the question again? I forgot. Sorry, I just woke up.
I mean, basically, how has the meta shifted?
Oh, how's the meta shifted? Thanks. Yeah. I was so on a tangent about Arcspore, I forgot. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so how's the meta shifted? So the meta shifted. I did have a good point, and I was getting that point. I missed up. But anyway, the meta shifted to playing Gurnakora, and almost where you have to be forced to play Gurnakora, because of how it spreads the points and stuff. So you were talking about Aerodin, Slizzard, and stuff like that. The thing about Gurnakora is it's spread about so many points, and so it's really hard to tackle it. But with Aerodin, Slizzard, if you have that Yrden, oops. If you have Scorch, oops. So that's why I think Gurnakora is doing really well on the pro ladder right now.
So I guess
yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, and thanks again for helping me with the question. Yeah, I don't know why I forgot that.
No problem. So I guess I'm about to summarize this, but I really have no input on Gurnakora, as I mentioned like 3 times already. The only deck I've been playing recently is like Woodland Shoop, which I call like Shooplando, and it's like completely different from like other Woodland decks I played. But I definitely agree with everything you guys said. I think like Gurnakora was introduced, like a healthy diversity into most of the decks, because I mean, apart from Arrakis Queen, I do face all monster leaders, so there's that as well. Whereas like before, like it was basically only Woodland. So there's that as well. So Chezzy, what's our next question?
Okay, so we've got like we just touched on there. We've got 4 legitimate leaders that all do different things at the moment in monsters, help you build different decks. With some overlap, we have discussed there is some overlap between the leaders, but they're all slightly different, and they all do allow for different deck building ideas and things. And one leader that is obviously rather underwhelming that we just touched on there, the big bug, the Arrakis Queen, right? But still quite interesting. The ability you can't deny is still quite one of the more interesting leader abilities in the game. But monsters, Monsters isn't just about the leaders or the necessarily the big hard hitting gold card finishers. It also has some of the best bronzes in the game, with the hard hitting strategies of like ghouls, like the ghoul being a very, very strong bronze, but also you've got the thrive units and stuff. So how would you actually adjust or build on the faction without diehards feeling like it's like you've nerfed the faction too hard, or as the show notes here tell me, the haters are hating. Like they feel like you haven't nerfed it enough. I just had to use the word haters there. Where do you feel the real power lies? Beardy, I'll let you have first crack at this one.
Well, first of all, like I definitely agree with you on the something you mentioned before. Like I really hate that they're nerfing monsters instead of like bringing other factions on level with monsters. But that being said, I don't really think monsters are as overpowered as people think. Like for instance, I think like the biggest they're just like too easy to be countered, right? Like especially like Woodland. And I think the card which like we haven't mentioned so far, and that is like way scarier than like Geralt or like Pro, like whatever, is like Blue Dream. So like with Blue Dream being the game, I think like monsters in powers like inherently like weakened. Also like bribery into creating spear tip. How is that a thing, right? So like I don't really think like monsters are as OP as people generally think. That's my opinion. Also like the fact like especially with Woodland, like the fact that you need to have that like last say just makes the faction like, at least like I never played Gunnikora, right? But like as a Woodland player, like it doesn't feel great, right? So you don't have like as big flexibility compared like to other leaders, and of course like compared to SK, like we don't have as much thinning. But I will say that like riders are by far the best thinning bronzes. Like I don't know why they are like they are at the moment. And like compared to like other factions, of course, like and our meme is I guess like a bit spooky, but like ST's thrash, right? So like monsters is definitely number 2, but I don't think it's like as oppressive as it seems. Like you have like a very cheap counters, like what's the name, Ulfheden is a very hard hitting card. Then like of course if you have Crack Black can always win round 1 if he wants to. So then like you play into like some Mega Scorch or some shenanigans. So I think like there are plenty of counters. And like Thrive Engines just like keep on dying against like NR, SK. Like it doesn't really matter. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
I feel like you didn't quite answer the question though on how would you nerf it.
Like, dude, like I'm not a developer. Like I can't like.
I love listening to you ramble on.
I'm not trying to like answer something I can't answer. Like that's just
okay. All right then. Well, let's move on to the faction ambassador. I'm sure he's got some real good takes on this. So, Mr. Oceanmud, what are your thoughts on how should they approach the upcoming nerf? Because I think it's been confirmed that the monsters is getting some sort of rework, or some sort of, it's getting looked at, not rework, but they are getting looked at.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, Ches, about how you wish that some cards would be buffed instead of others being nerfed. And Beardy, you were talking about how you don't feel that monsters are that oppressive. I would say the monsters are definitely popular right now. I don't know if they're oppressive either. They're definitely strong, but and Aif, you were saying whenever we had to restart that you felt that that it was kind of a monster anti-meta, right? That people were playing against monsters. So I'm kind of in the mindset of we've already just had a patch, right? Where we were addressing a lot of the issues with the Yrden and the Regis, and I feel like they did a good job. So I think that a good course of action is maybe not nerf anything right now, maybe not buff anything right now, and maybe wait until the March expansion, if it is in March, whenever it is. Because if you tweak stuff now, then the stuff that seems weak might be strong in the March expansion. Then you tweak more. You see what I'm saying? Like March isn't that far away. So I say we just wait until March and we see what happens. And we don't really have to nerf anything. If you really have to nerf one thing just to make people happy, then make Arc Explorer 5, I guess. But besides that, I think monsters are in an okay spot and they don't really need to be nerfed.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. What about you, Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think that it's the interesting thing about monsters, right, is that what that kind of makes them stand out from other factions is they have the really strong bottom end, the really strong 4 provision cards, 5 provision cards. And I mean, especially the 4 provision. You could argue that Arcus Board, as we've touched on, is just overstated.
Always 5 at least.
Yeah,
So.
all of the like Nekkar Warriors and Ancient Foglets in certain metas are good, are above, very much above rate. And I've seen this has kind of been discussed quite a lot on everyone's favorite subreddit recently, and what we've said, which I kind of agree with, is that what people seem to generally think is that other factions should have their 4s brought up in line with monsters. But what I've been thinking is that because of the way that the Mulligan update has changed, Gwen, it doesn't actually matter that Arcus boards are that, like, Arcus boards are strong, they're busted, they get way more than they should, but you're still going to Mulligan them away over a 5 or 6 provision point card, right? And because you have 2 Mulligans every round, you're always mulliganing. How many of your 4s, like, they're all busted, but how many of them do you ever end up playing? It's just the way that Gwent is, right, since the Mulligan change. So I don't know how. I think it's kind of, if you look at how many cards are strong, you might think, wow, all of their 4 provision cards are overstated. But when you consider how many you actually play on an average game, it probably is only a couple of points.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very very well put. I will just talk about my thoughts and feelings here. Like I said, I'd like to see other things buffed, but there are 1 or 2 things in monsters I would like to see addressed. You did mention that with the Mulligan change, a lot of the times you do want your bronze cards to be in deck and stuff. But I think one of the biggest issues, a lot of people are talking about Arcus 4 because it is strong, right? It's a 5 for 4 minimum, can get more value. But like you said, you like to mulligan that away from time to time. 1 card that you will never mulligan away if you know that your opponent has no counter, right, is Nekkars, right? Nekkars, I feel like the ceiling on Nekkars is way, way too high. With the change to how the meta, right? The meta's shifted away. ST isn't popular, so you're not seeing archers and stuff. So people are running Nekkars again. Gurney doesn't run Folktales. There's no counters to Nekkars, and I'm blue dreaming a Nekkar at the start of round 3. If I'm SK, I'm blue dreaming that Nekkar, and I'm getting 12, 14 points off of it if it's a long round, right? That Nekkar needs. It's a cool card, but I don't like how it is actually gold value in almost every matchup right now. Whereas, like you said, with the Arcus Sport, right? It's not gonna snowball like a Nekkar. I don't like these snowbally ones. The Arcus Sport, in my opinion, is okay, but the Nekkar is a bit too strong in my opinion. But it is easily counterable. That I do appreciate that it is easily counterable. I don't know how I would change it, but it seems to have the same problem that I had with Spotter, right? Spotter had the same issue with me. Like, yeah, sure, it can brick and be a 2-point card, but it can hit a 14. That shouldn't be on a 4 provision card. You shouldn't have 4 provision cards hitting that sort of value, in my opinion. So I'd like to see that addressed. That's just one real quick change. But as far as the big bodies and stuff go, I think the bigger problem with like old Spear Tip is that Nilfgaard, for example, has no finisher cards. That's why that's why they're so mad at monsters for having Spear Tip, right? They have no finisher. There is no finisher in Nilfgaard.
I mean, Timo is decent, I guess, even though I never played the card, but like...
Yeah, but it's not though, right? Because you don't know what you're getting. It's just RNG.
I mean, you just mill SK and then it's like 13 points.
Yeah, but it's very situational. Old Spear Tip Awake is just 13 big points, boom, easy job done. Nilfgaard doesn't have that. ST doesn't have that. Skellige doesn't have it, although it does run Horn, so it runs its alternative is Horn, right? It does have one, but it's not factional locked. Whereas Monsters is the only one with real big finishes, right? I think and I don't want them to nerf that from Monsters. I want to see them introduce that in all factions because it's a good way to play Gwent, right? I like the finishes. I think that's good.
Bring back Nova.
yeah, that sort of thing. But that's it from me. What's next up, Beardy?
More predictions, which is pretty much yes. So how do you predict the monsters method to shift with the potential nerfs to Tick Boys? Will the faction just become another boring mid-range faction abusing thrives in longer rounds? And this one is up to you to answer first, Mr. Jesse.
Okay, so we're assuming that the big boys are the things that they're targeting. I think Berza did mention about it on some sort of forums or something, so I think that's where we've got this from, this question. And if that is the case and they do end up nerfing the big boys, so to speak, I think there's already a deck out there, right? You've got the mid-range Gurney package is really strong. So I think that will be viable. I'm pretty sure Eridin can do some sort of shenanigans. You can still get away with this lizard. will be less good in the bleed scenario because it does abuse the big boy package to deny the bleed, but it'd still be unbeatable in a rank 3 provided they don't run Scorch or Yrden, which don't see a lot of play right now. But I think Eridim will be able to abuse other things. You've got Sabbath, you've got Morntide. You could easily, I'm sure somebody, if they change some provisions somewhere, you can abuse Dash or something like that, right? There's other things. Eridim's always finding something he can abuse somewhere. And I mean, if you do get rid of the big boys, then Woodland probably starts coming back because his ability is a finisher. He becomes the finisher, right? So Woodland then starts coming back because he is the finisher for the faction. So I think that the monsters will stay fairly similar. You'll see more of a mid-range sort of thing. Eridim might see more play. You'll see more things like the Gurney mid-range, but you might see Woodland used for the finisher ability potentially. But I think Gurney will just dominate if you get big boys. And I think the Thrive package is what carries it, allows it to do that mid-range better than anything else.
Well, very well put.
Yeah,
so, about you, Mr. Bowman?
I mean, what can one say after following that?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was like. I wouldn't like to be in Bowman's shoes, right? So,
I mean, yeah. So it depends basically where the nerfs come exactly, right? Like there are medium boys that are like, so a card that saw no play really before the introduction of Gurney was Griffin, right? The 8-point body that destroys any unit of your choice on your board for 7 provisions. Because basically it was too high risk if you drew it at the wrong time, even though it was kind of a fairly safe 7 for 7 that you could eat. I mean, yeah, and then you could eat it to make a 9-point goal later. It didn't see play because it was too high risk. If you didn't have a 1 on the board, you ended up, it just wasn't worth it. But now you have, because of Gurney, you have a consistent way to have a 1 on the board, and Griffins are pretty common, and they're not big in the same way that old Spear Tip is, or that even Goliath is. But so if the really big boys get nerfed, then I think there's space for a medium boys Gurney deck. Basically, it doesn't actually change the Thrive really because of the way that your Thrive units are statted. You don't ever fully cover 4 to 10. You end up taking jumps from 4 to 6 to 5 and then to 7, or So I think that the kind of medium boys could just slot in, and you'd probably run more of them. So yeah, but obviously as well, I think if they might, I don't know if it's been confirmed they're going to target the actual big boys, because they might be targeting more the overstated 4s that we were just discussing.
Destroy Deathwish. Yeah.
Oh my, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Maybe we can see Deathwish maybe more. I mean, Deathwish is. I like Deathwish. It's not in a bad place, I don't think either. So just a bit overshadowed.
Interesting. And finally, Mr. Oceanmud.
Yeah, I think what King Chess said earlier was interesting about how monsters really have the only finishers. I thought maybe that's the reason why monsters are pretty strong right now. With just throwing down ghouls and stuff like that, and they have the spear tips, and so I thought that was an interesting point. Ches also mentioned, this is just going back a tiny bit, that he thought Neckers were too big, right? Like they get up to like 10 or points or whatever.
Sorry guys, that's a question afterwards, so we shouldn't discuss that one.
Is it? Oh, I thought that's what he said earlier. All right, fair enough.
He did, and he shouldn't have done. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So if we're just talking in regards to, do I think that the nerfs will change the faction to be a boring mid-range Thrive faction? I think we're currently there right now. I think that there's a lot of mid-range that we just throw Thrive in there, and then with Gurney Core, you just play the decent sized units, and then you just try to win the game that way. I've tried my best to make interesting decks, like Keltullus, for example. But how am I supposed to make a Keltullus deck when Gurney Core is making leeches every turn? I'm just going to destroy the leech and then just make another one.
No points.
How am I supposed to make an Unseen Elder deck with Ragnarok and Dragon's Dream in it if it just kills the leech and it comes back? Like, it's not enough points. They just go tall on you. There is a deck though, Sanguine Rose. If you guys know who Sanguine Rose is, he's made kind of like a mid-range woodland spirit, and he's putting in a free, and he's putting in
Spears, right?
Kyrenex, and he's putting in Spears. So the interesting thing about that is how
yeah, I wonder where he got that from.
So, did he steal it from you, Aif?
No, I don't.
Yeah, Bowman is the real OG, right?
I mean, I I'm not sure about the timeline, but the truth is that as you've mentioned him, he has a usurper deck, Sanguine Rose, who which has, I mean, for those of you who are going to queue into him at some point, I don't want to ruin the fun, but it did partly inspire. It did partly inspire my woodland decks. So
okay.
Either way.
Can I say something else? You know, you have viewers in your chat sometime. Most of us are streamers here. You have viewers in your chat sometime, and they know what you look like, but you have no idea what they look like. aifBowman has probably been in my chat hundreds of hours, and I had no idea what this guy looked like. I don't know what I thought he looked like in my mind, but he definitely didn't sound like he sounds now in my head. I have no idea. Like, I had something built up, so it's kind of cool.
You thought you'd have a full head of hair, right?
I have no idea.
Come on, Jesse.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting too. I was gonna let that slide.
Out of interest, Oceanmud, was I British in your mind?
No, you were Russian. I think you're Russian in my mind.
I mean, he has a sexy accent, right? So yeah.
You didn't speak English. Like, everything was in broken English in my head. But yeah, so all right. I didn't even know did you say you're English? I didn't even know you're English now. I didn't, like, you know, I don't want to judge or anything, like, if you were. So yeah, but it's a great experience in that regard. But going back to the mid range, so Sanguine Rose, who took aifBowman's idea on the Kappa, took his idea on the Woodland Spirit. You can see the shift about going tall and already going into the mid range in that regard. So coming in the nerf, what Abe said about the lower thrive units, I don't know if that's going to have too much of an effect. But just one final point about the finisher. I think there's some finishers that kind of don't seem like finishers, but they are. Like the relics, the crones, for example. They're 11 points, right? If you get them all off. So you can potentially use those as a final card, the boosting and the damage. So it's kind of interesting to see how monsters are ending up, and I'd like to see what happens if they do decide to nerf, where it goes.
I'm just looking now quickly at the stream, and I noticed, I don't know if Adam's trying to do me a favor here, and he's just moved my camera down a bit so that my hairline wasn't visible anymore.
Yeah, that was it.
Taking the piss.
Yeah, because that doesn't make it any more obvious, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, my take on this is, I mean, you guys pretty much said everything, but my main issue with Homecoming, and I guess like this is like a whole another topic, but I just had to say it. I kind of hope that bronzes become relevant again. So like I'm hoping that like if they nerf like the big package, basically like opposite of what Chazzy said, like I really hate that the game is really oriented towards like you know, like finishes or, you know, like some wacky combos instead of like relying on your bronzes. Like if we go back in you know, like old Gwent, like the worst thing for Great Supply was like not drawing like your bronzes, not drawing your you know, Freya's great souls, like whatever, right? Whereas now, like you just want to mulligan away like all your bronzes, they're like considered to be shit cards. So like I really hope that, you know, they kind of address that. Like they, like I think like Tailbot also made that comment like a while ago that like bronzes should like cost like at least like 5p or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, like I hope like I don't know, Arrakis Queen becomes playable or something like that, like maybe like Deathwish, because like Deathwish is also kind of like, you know, engine based deck. Since you do rely on your bronzes, they have no finisher though, so they need to like add like Goliath for no reason or Spit Tip, right? Yeah. So it's kind of sad. I really wish that the game was more, you know, bronze oriented, but it is what it is. So what's our final topic, Mr. Chelsea?
Okay, so onto our final topic, something that we have touched on quite a lot, and something that I brought up obviously prematurely. My bad. But
because you haven't read the notes before, man. Like it's just like unacceptable.
No, I think subconsciously, right? I'd read the notes, and this had like when I read the notes that this came up, it like I was like, yeah, that's a really good point, and I accidentally used it early. My bad. But what do you think about the thrive mechanic, and is it binary / too snowbally in potential? Should Neckers really be allowed to reach 10+ value for just 4 provisions, despite sometimes being just a useless 2-3 point play? Beardy, obviously I've already said what I think about Neckers and how I feel. I feel you just touched on it a little bit there, but you go on, expand. What do you think about Neckers and the Thrive package in general?
Well, I think like Thrive package is a very interesting mechanic. I like it as an idea, but I do agree with you that like in Nakas right now, I feel like a very OP because archers are nowhere to be seen, right? And the most popular Brewer deck is the trap deck, which happens to run like no archers, right? So like when Nakas are not being answered, like they just like win you the round hands down. Like I got them a couple times to 12, 14 points, which is just ridiculous for like for Pete, right? But apart from that, like design wise, I think like it's pretty cool. Like they start as 2 points, and they demand like they usually can lock like one guy, right? The other guy sticks, and then effectively you have like one Thrive unit, which is still like very good value. But I don't know. I like the mechanic that they start as small and they keep thriving. But I don't know how they would change it without breaking the card. That's the main issue I have with these like nerfs or not. Like the change to ponies, Uni and Cairo was like very clever, but like usually CDPR either like deletes the card from the game. So like look at Protoss, right? So the card probably won't see play unless you're playing like full card advantage deck, right? So it's pretty shaky, ground like nerfs and buffs. I think it's rather hard to make a perfect balance.
Sure.
But I like it. I like it. So that's me.
Okay. All right. Just because BD obviously didn't read the show notes here and also missed this point, if you guys in the audience have any questions you'd like us to discuss at the end of this show, just let us know in chat and we will read some out at the end of the show. So if you guys do have anything you want us to talk about, just let us know. All right, moving on. Oceanmud, what are your thoughts on the Thrive package and the snowballing potential? BD cut you off earlier when you were about to dive into this topic, so I'm sure you've got something interesting for us here.
Oh right, yeah, I was just trying to respond. It's kind of weird because when you guys ask questions, you have great points, and so whenever you say something, I want to respond, but then we move on to the next question, and so I'm like, all right, well, I guess that. But anyways, so about the Thrive and stuff like that, I think that it's fair to say that Neckers, under the right circumstances, are strong. When people look at me and they say, "Oh, he's the monster faction ambassador," he's probably biased. That might be true, but I try my best to look at stuff objectively. Which is why I said earlier maybe Arcsport could be put up to a 5 or something. But whenever I look at Neckers, do I think Neckers are too strong? Well, what are the answers for Neckers? You were saying how ST doesn't run archers, but they can run archers, and they're not bad value. Because why aren't they bad value? Because they're flexible. They can either do 2 damage or they can do 1. So it's like kind of like a Swiss Army knife. SK has crack and they have the boats. You have Northern Realms has Arbalest and they have Revenants. So there are ways to deal with Neckers. They can get out of control. But even with, I think Nilfgaard probably has the hardest time with Ox. They probably have Ox, but that requires Surret in the hand to really deal with the Neckers. But then you're stuck with a 1-point Necker in your hand. So I think the drawback of them being potentially 2 points justifies that they can become 7, 8 points in the future, even at 4 provision, because a lot of decks have even, when ST was in the meta, cut Neckers. They're like, I can't even run Neckers because they'll just get blown up. So it's that choice about how the meta is running and how you want to counter stuff. And I think that's what makes a good card game.
I think that's a very, very fair point, and I do appreciate the fact that they were cut when ST was popular, right? And there are things that keep them in check. I just don't like the fact that they can reach 14 value, that they are that strong sometimes. I do like their ability and stuff. I feel like they should have a cap. They can only reach 5. They can only get to 5. That is their cap on their Thrive. Because if they get to 5, that's good value on them, or something like that. I feel like the snowballing nature, there should be an absolute limit. And I said the exact same thing about Spotter, right? I don't think the 1 provision nerf to Spotter is a good change, because it can still hit a spear tip, right? It can still be 14 for 5 provisions. It's just ridiculous. There should be some sort of cap on those things, because like Oceanmud just pointed out there, right? They don't see a lot of play when the meta is not good for them, but when the meta does suit them, they're just utterly busted. And I don't like that, the fact that they're that swingy, but I do really like the design of Thrive as in general and Neckers to a larger extent. So maybe put some sort of cap on them. I don't know how you'd go about it. Maybe limiting them to 4 each body or 5 each body, something like that might be better. That's just my
maybe the cap is consistency. So, for example, if that makes sense. So, for example, why don't people run Gascon and stuff? If you want to like consistently climb, then I don't think, and people in Pro Ladder got there for a reason. I don't like if they troll, then okay, but they're not going to do very well most of the time. So, I think consistency is a good cap in that regard. But I do agree that they can get really strong, and even having an upper limit might be an interesting thought.
Okay, so we've now touched on all that. So we're going to be looking for some 1 or 2 questions to wrap up this show. So Beardy, have you found any yet in the chat that you'd like to discuss?
Not really. Nope.
Oh, did I actually go to you, Bowman? I just realised I don't think I
Yeah,
actually went to you,
Bowman
Bowman. I just skipped Bowman out.
yeah.
It's because they've cut out half his face, right? I forgot he's there. I can't see his big shiny forehead anymore.
Here you go, Chelsea.
Oh, thanks, man.
I'll just keep talking until someone in chat writes a question, right? So we'll just,
okay.
just as long as it's necessary. No, so I think what you guys said are very good points. I think that that I won't discuss Neckers. I think we've done Neckers to death here, but I will say that I really like the Thrive mechanic in general. So when Homecoming first came out, a lot of people kind of didn't like that the game was reduced to boost and damage, right? And I think that's people. I haven't seen that sort of the fact that the game's been simplified like that talked about much recently. I think people are starting to realize there is complexity just on a different level. But I think that Thrive's a really good way, like, is boost done right. You know, essentially it's just boosting. Thrive is just boosting, but it gives you really some. I mean, we're not playing 4D chess with Thrive, but there are some interesting decisions to be made, right? You know, like you can't just play all your Thrive units in the natural order because of tempo, right? If you do that as I mean, it's a bit different with Gurney, but generally you're going to fall behind on tempo and get passed on. So it does make some decision making, and I think it's a cool mechanic. Yeah, and I just won't talk about Neckers because I think what you guys said is completely.
Also, Gimpy kills all Neckers, and somehow we failed to mention that guy. So.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Aif,
do you think Neckers are too strong or not? Like you said, you won't mention them, but do you think they're too strong?
I don't think they're too strong. I completely sympathize with what Ches is saying, and the main difference for me is that, like, I think Spotter was a problem because essentially when you play a Necker, your opponent knows whether or not they can deal with it. It's not RNG. Like, a Spotter comes down, you literally just praying. And we before had it, it hits 14, and then you want to smash your laptop up. Whereas
I had the Junta once, and that's it, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's it, right? Whereas like the Necker's there, you either have the answer in your hand or you don't. You plan your strategy for the round based on it. If I'm playing round 1 against monsters and they put Neckers down and I know I don't have an answer, I know I can't win the round. I need to tempo out. And plan my strategy accordingly. But yeah, and I would say that the fundamental point that I think you guys made is that you have to know, it rewards you for knowing the meta well, because you know whether to mulligan them away or not. There are times when I wasn't even including Neckers for sure, because when Scoia'tael was really popular, it was insane and when aifBowman was popular especially, it was insane to even include them. So yeah, I think they're a cool card actually on overall, and I like them.
Okay. All right, Beardy, have you found any questions you'd like to discuss?
I mean, not really. Basically, like, are Dranos any good or Hounds? And like, I don't think that really requires discussion, but
I would like to talk about Hounds, but more in general the 3 body deal 3 damage cards. I'd just like to talk about that for 2 seconds. It's not necessarily a monsters thing, but obviously they have one, right? They have Wild Hunter Hound, which I personally think is the best stat out of all the 3 damage, 3 body 3 damage cards, because you've got Panther in ST and you've got Pirate Captain in SK. I don't think. Oh, you've got Nausicaa in NG. That's also pretty well started. I quite like Nausicaa. And the other faction is NR, and theirs is. I guess these. Oh, theirs will be what's it called, right? It'll be Pikeman. I guess would be their equivalent. I guess.
Well, maybe it's a bit. Yeah. I don't know if there's a direct equivalent, but the Temerian Infantryman.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
But on this topic of I really went into this on my stream, so it is something I would like. I just quickly touch on is that I feel like, whilst I don't want everything to be the same in every faction, I don't want all the cards to be exactly a 3 damage 3. It has to be a 5 provision card with no condition or whatever. But I would like to see cards that have a very similar condition and very similar stats to not be 2 provisions different, right? Like, why is Pirate Captain a 4 and Panther a 6? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I think that Wild Hunt Hound is very well statted, right? Because it's good removal and stuff. But I don't like the fact that there's big provisions difference. But as far as the question went, how are Wild Hunt Hounds? I think Wild Hunt Hounds are well started and really good cards. I don't know what about the rest of you think on this topic.
Yeah, I agree that they're well statted. I think that I like them. I used to before the patch I'd run them a lot, but I think it's interesting now that the since the patch because obviously to be honest, they're quite good value even when you don't remove an engine, but to be really good they need to be removing something. And now with the changes with me, basically the 2 engines.
Can't remove Arbalest, right? So
yeah, exactly. Me buffs engines up to 4, so now that's why everyone's running in Rage Different and stuff, because 4 removal is the key point. 3 used to be the kind of the important removal range, but 4 is now the important range. And the other engine really is Nausicaa Sergeant, which a smart Morvran player will just buff up. I mean, that's the most common NG deck you see, right? Is Morvran. So the 3 removal hasn't got the premium it used to have. But I think I agree with you, Ches, that they're a very well statted card.
Yeah, I agree about Wild Hunt Hound. I think it's an okay card. I probably don't run it, but that's because I don't run very tall cards either. And I thought it was very interesting what you said, Aif, about smart Morvran people buffing like their Nausicaa Sergeant or whatever. That's so annoying. Like just leave it alone. So yeah.
Stop touching your own stuff.
Well, because it's too smart. Like, when it's too smart, like, because there's plays that are unintuitive. Like, you don't think that you're supposed to buff the engine because it's going to get strong anyway. And why would you want to buff it because it's tall and then you're just going to get it removed? So when they buff it to thing like 5, it's just like, oh my gosh. So, but that's part of being on Pro Ladder. So I think Wild Hunt Hounds are okay. But this is what I was talking about earlier about the things doing 4 damage, like the Ifrits and the Chironexes that are kind of in the Woodland Spirit decks right now. So yeah, I don't really run Wild Hunt Hounds, but they'll probably be used in the future since they have the tag and stuff. I'm sure there'll be synergies.
I did actually find one question that I think is actually worth discussing here, and that is the future of Arrakis Queen. What do we all think of?
Teammates loading, right?
Yeah, so Lothin brought this up. So what do we all think about Arrakis Queen? Because personally, from my own point of view, I think Arrakis Queen's a pretty cool ability. I think her ability is very, very cool. It's just there isn't a lot going for other than the fact that her ability is cool, right? Right, like she doesn't have much support for her ability, shall we say. Like, there's not that much support. The cards that do support it aren't very good, or easily...
they also nerfed Ruhen, I believe. So...
Yeah, did they? I was even unaware of that. But it's not only that, right? The cards that do support it, even if they are good, are very vulnerable. Like, so they're either very, very buffed up cards that just take a Peter, for example, like a She-Troll or whatever it is. You've got things like that, right? They're easily removed. Or locked or moved or whatever. So I think that Arrakis Queen is a cool ability, and I would like to see more. It just needs an expansion, right? It needs more cards to be any viable. Once it gets more cards, then maybe we need to tweak some of the points and stuff on it. But I think its ability is pretty cool. Bowman, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it might tie in a bit. I mean, Arrakis Queen hasn't been viable for a long time, but they did buff her provision significantly, didn't they, in the most recent patch? But I wonder how much of it ties into what Oceanmud and I were just talking about, the 4 removal. Because, I mean, Arrakis Queen basically needs a Slizzard to stick, right? I mean, that makes a huge difference. And with 4 removal being kind of everywhere, your Slizzard never sticks. And I know this because when Gurney first got released, it's so basically if you can get a Slizzard to stick with Gurney, you can get 2 points per turn from her rather than just 1. And so I tried it, and then I realized everyone has all the 4 removals they can because of me. So I think that it's not a very good time for Arrakis Queen as long as the card set requires Slizzards to stick, because you can only have two Baba Ghazi, right? That's not enough to carry the game. So maybe with an increased kind of consume consume card set and less reliant on a 4 sticking, she could see play, because I don't think that the provisions are a problem. I think it's a very strong ability, and 15 provisions is pretty generous for how strong the ability could be.
Okay, and Oceanmud, what are your thoughts on? I'm sure that you've dabbled with Arrakis Queen, right?
Yeah, I tried, especially during the faction challenge. I tried to use Arrakis Queen because you had to get 3 wins with her. I went 3 out of 5, so I got it pretty easily. But that's because 2 people forfeited because I was Arrakis Queen, so they were being nice. Like, it would have been torture if I had to do it the regular way. I guess they just knew me or something. But I'm glad that someone in, I don't know who it was because I don't have chat open, but I'm glad someone in chat asked this, because it ties back when I was telling you guys earlier how you make great points and then we move on. aifBowman was talking about the provisions, about how the leaders were raising provisions like 12 to 15 and stuff like that. And I think it was Beardy maybe that was talking, or maybe I have it reversed. And one of you was talking about how you just, yeah, it was, so it was Aif saying that you have to mulligan low power cards like 4s and 5s, because how many 4s and 5s are you going to be playing? So the point I'm trying to make is that when they're balancing stuff with the provisions, how much does it really have an effect? Like with Arrakis Queen, if you put Arrakis Queen from 12 to 15, how much more Arrakis Queens are we seeing? And whenever you're making Gurnakora low, Aif, you were talking about how it's refreshing to see a low provision leader in Gurnakora when you have cracks running around that are however many provisions and stuff. But does the provisions really matter that much? Because if you have the 4 provision card, like you were talking about, Aif, then you just mulligan it away anyway. It's just in your deck. And so you're getting basically the 3 provisions that Gurnakora has that are lower. It decreases the consistency a little bit. But do you see where I'm coming from? So in balancing in provisions, I don't even know if that's correct. In my mind, I don't even know if that's really healthy, because you just put a really low statted card in there and then you mulligan it away. So making Arrakis Queen viable, I don't think it's based on provision. I think it's what you guys were saying about expansions. And I guess we'll have to wait and see. But making Unseen Elder like +1 provision or something like that, that's a drop in a bucket. What's it going to do, right? So if you're going to be changing stuff, you have to be more abstract with it, I think.
I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I do think that the provisions on leaders is impactful. I think that, like Bowman did point out, that the most commonly played leaders are the ones with the highest provisions, and there is a reason for that. However, abilities do matter. Like, obviously, they have to have a viable ability as well.
Lightning's not being played, right? And she's 19. So.
Yeah. There needs to be a balance of both. You can't just have a leader with an insane amount of provisions and it does absolutely nothing. A bit like Ithne right now, right? She's got an insane amount of provisions, but she has nothing really. Like, because I tried to build an Ithne deck simply because she had 19 provisions, and I don't run any card that synergizes with her, so she's just 4 points, right? Because the cards that synergize with her are basically pointless, right? Like, you've got Scorch, but that's only good against monsters. It's bad against the rest of the field. You've got Regis, which is just not a good card, really. It's got some surprise value, but that's about it. And then you've got Shiru, but you have no way of buffing Shiru, so it's like it doesn't really work. And he got nerfed as well, so like there does need to be some sort of synergy with the leader. Like, the leader has to have some sort of decent ability, but obviously provisions are useful as well, because why would you ever run Bran, for example, over Crack when Crack just has more provisions and possibly a slightly better ability, but mainly because he has more provisions, right? Like, I think that provisions.
Don't speak badly of Bran, like that's my boy. Yeah.
I think we're making the same point, Chaz. I think we're making the same point that it's about abilities. Like, provisions matter, but only to a lesser extent. It's about the abilities that matter.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
But on paper, like, Queen's ability is like inherently busted, right? Like, it just like it never really happens. Like, I think I played Arrakis Speed last time before the Mulligan update. Back then, and I was even running witches, and it was like really really hard not to brick. So like, my experience is Arrakis is probably like better now, right? But like, the amount of times you actually get like little spiders on board, like it's just like ridiculously like low, right? So like, I agree with what you guys said. I think we need to see new cards, new expansions, and then maybe if something is like a good bronze which can't be as easily removed, and Also, like Arachne's Queen has no short round finisher whatsoever, like literally nothing. So even like if they are somehow like caught up, you still win by, I don't know, like double digits, right? So I don't know. It feels like by far the weakest leader. And even if she had 2 more provisions, I would say like she still wouldn't see play. And like Gurney maybe 2 less, and it would still be like being played more. Maybe not like 2 less, because like Usurper is basically not seeing any sorts of play, right? But provisions matter, but so the abilities. So I guess we can all agree on that one. Yep.
What I do find funny is that you say that Arachne's Queen has no finisher, but the one time Arachne's Queen did see play in Homecoming was during the beta, right? When all of her like drones were not.
Yeah, because of Grave Hag,
right?
right?
Grave Hag, right? Grave Hag was
yeah.
just an instant finisher. Like, so
like
I mean, was it
points.
busted? Because like it's like Slizzard, right? You could just count. I guess if you don't have last say, that was the problem, right? Because Arachne's Queen just gets last say if it gets its range.
Yeah, but they can't make it immune, right? So
No. But they always get last say. Like they could always easily get last say because.
But they needed double say.
That is true. They would need.
Yeah,
double
I
so
don't think that was inherently busted.
Maybe make it come back, right? Because then you might have Arachne's Queen be viable. They'd have a finisher again. They would get a finisher.
Just
Maybe
like,
that is.
Yeah.
That might be a way of. That might be the one way of making it playable, because that would be a really sick finisher if you gave them Morntart.
Petrus filter into Morntart.
Boom, job done.
Yeah. Better than Valkyrie Riddle.
Was it Ches that said that Arachne's Queen or Gurnikor is like a better Arachne's Queen? Was it you that said that earlier, Ches?
I said it was a better Unseen Elder.
Unseen Elder. All right.
Someone
I
did
think
say that. You're right, though. Someone did say that.
I think that was an interesting point too, because Gurnikor has less risk than Arachne's Queen. Because like with Arachne's Queen, you have to destroy stuff to create stuff, and with Gurnikor, it just goes straight up. So I think that's one of the reasons why Arachne's Queen isn't that viable right now is because maybe Arachne's Queen would be more viable if it made it to where even if the opponent destroyed one of your units, you got an Arachne's drone or something. That's just off the top of my head, but I do think that the leader needs work right now, and so it's just a wait and see, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. I have one last question just to wrap it up, and my question is: what do you guys think of Eredin's ability in general? Like, do you think it's a good ability? Do you think it should be in the game, or do you think the whole immunity thing is wrong? And to a lesser or more extent, what do you think of Slizzard and that kind of deck, and how that is like the new kind of Consume or Sabbath? I think people are more liking it to Sabbath, right? It's even more binary than Consume used to be. It's more like the Sabbath of old. How do we feel on the immunity and the Slizzard deck that's been born from this? I think we'll start with Beardy on this one. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is a really good question. I think like Eredin's ability is inherently OP, right? Because as soon as something is broken, Eredin becomes broken, right? I think like in my book, like both him and Amir like should be changed, because it just like flaw in the design wise, in my opinion. But to answer your question specifically, I think Slizzards, playing against Slizzards is very, very nasty feeling, especially if you have no answers, right? Because you lose in a long round 3, and if you bleed, like you're down a card, and then you probably still lose because they still have like big finishes, right? But I think the main reason why the deck is as cancerous is another reason why like artifacts are like quote unquote cancerous, right? Because you have no ability to interact, and that's effectively breaking the game. And like we play in a meta where like playing cards which are like control cards are better than just like like point spamming cards, right? So effectively, if you deny that, then all of a sudden all your cards become bricks, like and that just breaks the game. And I don't think it should be that way. Like I don't think one leader should just like make half of your deck obsolete, right? So I definitely don't like enjoy playing both as and against that deck. It just doesn't feel nice winning or losing or whatever. And then like on another side of the coin is like you can say like it's like super easy to counter like Eredin. You just like Scorch Imlerate, Scorch Grave Hag, Scorch like Slizzard, like whatever. But you do need to run that card, right? And you do need to find it. And like unless you're SK, like you're never gonna find it reliably. So I don't know. I think Eredin's probably the strongest ability if you think about it. Like he probably deserves like some kind of rework in my mind. But yeah, that's me.
Okay, and what about you, Mr. Oceanmud? As the faction ambassador, how do you feel Everything is representing your faction? How do you feel about him?
Can I defer to Aif and then answer after Aif?
Of
Aif,
course.
what do you have to say? And I'll copy your answer.
It's a tough one. I think what you guys are saying is right, but overall, okay, so I think that probably it's good. I like having Eridan in the game. What I will say though is I think it's only.
Of course, the spear running woodland player would say that it's good.
But
I mean, he's a
out.
cool leader, I guess.
Hear me out. I like that it's on the lead. I like that it's a leader ability, right? You have like a big red warning banner to your opponent from the first go. I'm Eridan. I'm going to make something immune. That means I'm doing something degenerate. You know, you're telling, and that's like you. So I like that kind of way because then you know, and it's good. Like it's nice that there should be decks that you have to bleed, right? It shouldn't just be a dry pass round 2 mess. There should be decks that need to bleed, decks that need to be bled, and I think Eridan's, although a bit borderline in some cases, and I think Biddy was saying it's true that who knows with future cards, right? Maybe there'll be some horrible interactions, but I think that having it on a leader at least is good because it's signposted to the opponent.
And, sorry about that. Yeah, I'll answer now.
Okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt because I said I was going to answer after Aif, and so I was trying to make a good transition, but then I just made it even worse.
No, I just wanted to know what Aif thought about Slizzard, the Slizzard deck in general as well, because he kind of skipped over that part of the question.
Yeah, good point.
I don't like the Slizzard deck because it's very hard to bleed, and I always lose trying to bleed it. And I always
that's what I said.
Yes,
right?
I thought you said that it's good that Eridan can do this and that
it is
can
good.
bleed.
Overall, it's good. But the problem is that and that's just good deck building, right? Slizzard players have gone away from this kind of 2 bridge trolls, 2 rot fiends, kind of obvious Slizzard build to have the big boy package because they're trying to play around the fact that that they will be bled. And when I say that, that's good ideas from lots of people on our team, including Chezzy here. So no, that's just my personal experience. I've lost to Slizzard a lot of times. So I'm a bit salty about it, but I do like overall Eridan's ability.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think Eridan's ability is unique. I think a degenerate might be an okay word to use. Toxic might be an okay word to use. I'm not against that. Like I was saying with the Kiltellus, I even took it even further and I only ran potions and stuff. Like
yeah, that's pretty degenerate.
so much fun. Like, well, for me it's fun. Like because I really like just messing up people's game plans. But like on their side, whenever they do have the answer or whatever, it's just an instant loss. So it's kind of polarizing in that way, where it's like, okay, you're either going to do a great job or it's not going to be a good job at all. I think Eridan does have some unique gameplay to it. So for example, if you're just running like a big boy kind of deck, then you can do it with an Ozreal or something. You can immune it and they won't be able to interact as like a last resort and stuff like that. I don't think Eridan is too strong. Beardy, you were talking about how if something's broken, then Eridan becomes broken. And I think that's an interesting point because Siri Dash, when it was at 4 turns, I would just throw Siri Dash and then Eridan it or whatever to get free card advantage round 1. It was pretty sick. So I think that it's interesting to see how Eridan can break a card, and there's going to be answers, but I don't like where there's only one answer for a card, just like the Mandrake with the Sabbath. I don't like that. That was back in before Homecoming. I don't like the fact that with the Slizzard, you basically only need Yrden or Scorch or you're going to lose the game. So I don't know how to deal with that, to be honest. It's kind of interesting, and those aren't fun for me to play. Like I don't like stuff like that, but I'm interested to see in how they change it. I don't know how I feel about Eridan. That's why I deferred to Aif. Like it's a very weird situation, I think.
Also, I don't think we. Leader is unplayable, but still, like, if somehow like Usurper becomes popular, like he just like shits on Eridan, like that's probably like the best matchup for Usurper, right? because like he just like locks, removes like everything, right? So
The problem
there
with
are like variations, like scenarios in the future where like Eredin is like kept in check while still having his like ability, because if you bleed him and they do not rely, I mean, you still probably lose, but what I'm trying to say is like effectively like he can only be like 3 points, which like 3-point
Yeah,
leader
yeah.
is just like super bad, right?
Mhm.
So, but yeah, like Usurper just like counters it like super hard, I think. Probably
I
like
actually,
most of any leaders.
so like you're saying with Usurper, it counters really hard, and I think it counters Monta and Sabbath quite well. But the Slizzard deck, because it doesn't actually gain any points from the immunity, so to speak, right? It's just bricking your damage. Usurper decks are just so bad they can't beat the Slizzard deck, like, because it's just big body monsters, right? They can't beat big body monsters because
I mean,
they're only,
they have Leo and like
yeah, Leo
they
gets some
probably
value.
can't because of like
Yeah, they don't have the provisions, right?
yeah, true. They
It's a
can't
bit
even
of
run like all Serid combos, so
yeah, and you're only denying 3 points on Eredin, right? Eredin is just 3 points. Like, obviously,
true.
the immunity is huge and stuff. So Usurper, even though he does counter, doesn't counter because he's just too bad, which is a funny
yeah,
thing.
that's like another topic, I guess.
Mm. But as far as the Eredin thing goes, I don't like Slizzard, right? Well, I do like Slizzard. So I'm saying I'm here saying no, I don't like Slizzard. I do like Slizzard. I play a lot of Slizzard, and I got good scores and stuff with it, and I help build it and whatnot. But I don't like the idea of Slizzard. I think it was probably a design oversight, right, with Slizzard and Eredin, because Eredin's supposed to make one unit immune. If you make Slizzard immune, you make your entire board immune, basically, is what you're doing, right? You're just making your entire board immune. That wasn't their game plan. They never meant for that to happen. They obviously need to... That's something that I imagine that will be addressed at some point in the future. I like but Eredin's ability is a cool, unique, and has a lot of it brings a lot of like thought. It makes things, you have to think quite hard when you play against Eredin, right? It gives you a lot of decision making and stuff to do. So I don't necessarily mind Eredin. However, my biggest problem with Eredin is immunity. I just hate immunity in general. Immunity is just so unfun, which I just feel like that unless they can make immunity more fun for both sides, right? Because it is fun playing Slizzard and being like, haha, look at your Donar, you can't get any value. You Karen X, you have to Karen X yourself for 4 points. That's really funny. You just played a 0-point Karen X.
And then you lose to 50-point Scorch.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, it's so unfun on the other side that I don't think that should be in the game. So unless they can make immunity less binary and less obnoxious to play against, I feel like they may need to take it out of the game. It's a fairly new mechanic, and it just seems to cause problems at the moment. So unless they can fix it, my opinion is just maybe get rid of it. The same as my opinion is on artifacts. If you can't get it to work, then you may need to move away, because it's just so unfun to play with, right? It's unhealthy, it's toxic, it's degenerate, whatever you want to call it. It is got those issues, and this is coming from the guy who plays Slizzard, loves Slizzard. Like, I do think it's unhealthy for the game. But I think that's it for today, right, Beatty? Have you got anything else? Do you want to...
Yeah, I think that's it. It was pretty fun, and I
Really
guess we
good.
should starting to wrap it up. So first of all, like I would like to thank my co-host Chelsea. I'm really looking forward to doing this like again with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to going forward as well. These are always great, and we're now into season 3. We've had some fantastic guests.
So like yes.
This has been one of my favorite episodes. Love having a Bowman on. Bowman's always a pleasure to have you here. And Oceanmud, it's been an absolute joy having you here. I love hearing your thoughts and stuff, and you've been very like thought provoking in your responses. So thanks for joining us, and apologies again for our technical issues at the start.
No, it's been I agree, Jess. This is my 3rd episode, and this has been the one I've enjoyed most, to be honest. So it's been a cracking episode as far as I'm concerned. And not only has Oceanmud been thought provoking, but also some comedy gold as well.
Comedy gold, yeah.
It was unintentional. Thanks.
And there he goes again.
But moving just slightly back, I know we're ending, but moving slightly back.
Oh, here it is.
Maybe like a solution with the Eredin. I don't know, maybe give it a cooldown or something where immunity only lasts for a set amount of turns.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I don't know, because then you can deal with it, like, I don't know, like give it like where it's immune for 3 turns or something, so you'd use it at the very end, or if it has
Yeah,
a cooldown on it.
That's really cool, because then you could use finishes, right? It would be a protect your finishes thing. That's pretty cool. I like that idea.
Well, I just thought of it, so it's still in the works.
As we've gone back to it, I guess I'll say what I was thinking.
We're actually wrapping up.
Let's
here.
go.
Yeah, sorry,
let's go,
Bowman.
boys.
What are you doing, Bowman? We ain't got time.
When Homecoming first came out, I thought immunity meant that you couldn't click on the card at all. So
I did too.
Yeah. So and maybe that would. I mean, basically all the uses of immunity except for Keltalis would not work anymore with that way of working. But maybe that's a healthier design space, right? When an immune unit you can't target using cards, or just you can't activate abilities on. Anyway, just the thought.
Because dash would still work then, right? You could still abuse dash.
And Keltalis would still work.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I could see that. They're 2 really good ideas, and it would make it less toxic. I like those 2. Great shapes, guys.
But I want to thank everyone for having me on. This has been in the works for a while. We've had discussions for months about having me on, and then things get in the way and stuff. So it is good to finally be on here, and I want to thank you guys for taking the time to speak with me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. All right, Beardy.
So before we go, I'd like to announce our brand new website, which you can check like www.teamleviathangaming.com for all your Gwent content needs. We will be releasing our meta report put together by our team, which will be updated weekly throughout the season. So there won't be, we'll try to do it, of course. There'll be no more outdated meta reports, right? Which is pretty damn fog, if you ask me. See you all next week when we are joined for Anna by very Anna ambassador, Mr. McBee, and our teammate who made to open number 8 through qualifiers, Mr. Green Knight. And I would also like to add how proud I am of both Alessia and Green Knight for making that. I love you guys, so I'm sure you'll do well. And goodbye, everybody, and thanks again for watching.
Cheers, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you very much, guys.